So welcome. This is uh, it's been a while since we've done this. I believe the last time we did this was back in, I don't know, maybe February or March, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. And a lot's happened since then. Maybe some of you that are watching this, maybe you saw the initial testimony with Charlotte and myself, sort of speaking about our experiences. And today we're going to go deeper because a lot has happened since then. And the Lord's revealed a lot to us. And there are many things that He showed us that we've benefited from. So we want to share some of that with you guys, so that whatever the Lord wants you to receive, you can receive for your season, your situation, your relationship, your walk with the Lord Jesus. So the very first one we want to talk about, the experiences that we've had, is deliverance from the spirit of motherhood. So if I can remember with that story, it started back when we started having children. And maybe you can describe the like the postpartum depression and that you're going through, because I want people to understand that this was a long drawn out journey, and it wasn't for a while that we actually started experiencing the deliverance side of it.
Yeah. When after we had our first son, Trident, it was right after he was born that I experienced the postpartum depression. And I had heard a lot about it and thinking maybe it wouldn't get to me. But when it did, I was very quick to recognize it and then call for help. So that's when I had reached out to a nurse, and she came to assess me and give me a quiz and everything, and then also then refer me to a therapist, which was in Campbellford. We were in Brighton at the time, so which was a blessing because the wait time was pretty far, but then or pretty long. Sorry, I should say. But I was able to get into Campbellford like within the month, so I was able to see my therapist there, and which was helpful, knowing that there was somebody who could help me through it, because I was praying, and I needed support from people, but at that point, I still didn't know how I needed the support. What happened? So I'll just talk a little briefly about what the postpartum depression looked like for me, and so it hit me like a ton of rocks, I think, because of the initial part of me having to have a cesarean. Again, I knew that was a possibility, but I never really thought it was going to happen to me. But when it did, I was very scared because I'd never had a surgery like that before. So
Yeah.
I was very scared going into it. My mother-in-law was there, my mother was there, and I was just freaked out. And they even said to me, they said, like, if you don't calm down, we're going to put you out. And I'm like, oh, okay, just calm down. So I think that was the initial start of it all. And it never really left me. So unfortunately, Josh could do nothing right. You know, if he held the baby and the baby was crying, I would think that he was hurting the baby, or he wasn't doing something properly, and I could maybe do it better. But the problem is that mentally I couldn't do it better, because when Trident kept crying, it would still affect me. And so it just overpowered, unfortunately. Even though the support was there, it just, I guess, had to play out. And it ended up fizzling out probably within, no, and I want to say fizzling out, it started to become a little bit more less, probably maybe 6 or 7 months. But because we had that really rough start to the beginning of having a baby, starting our family, which is supposed to be like the most best thing, right? Or at least one of the best things for a couple to experience together is their first child. Having kids, it's wonderful. It's a blessing.
It ended up being one of the toughest things.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop there. It went from that into our second. And, we kind of almost thought we got away from the past with our second one. And then it's like it hit you again.
Yeah, because I was so certain that it could happen again to me. So I'm like, I'm going to be prayed up. I'm going to know what triggers me. And so I actually, the postpartum hit me with Kingdom at the month of when he was 4 months. When he was 4 months old, and I had a really hard time with him crying. So I think that also triggered it. I really tried and to combat everything. And I didn't allow myself to get sucked into that black hole is what I call it. But then it came out of nowhere. I let my guard down. And it was at like the, month 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever that it came again. And that was a really tough time. With that.
I think it's important also because this is a perfect, like Satan will 100% try and use your kids to come between you and your spouse. Don't think for a second he's not going to use pregnancy, birth, postpartum. He's not going to use those things to like draw a wedge between you and your spouse. And even recently we had a revelation that literally the demonic was trying to use our kids as a conduit to get to us.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, like just as we're talking, I got that revelation, like, yeah, from the moment we got pregnant, our very first child, the demonic has been trying to use that to really draw a wedge, because it was only after we had kids that probably we experienced the worst part of our marriage. You wanted to move out. I had some secret life on the side because I was trying to cope and escape.
Which you explain in your book that you just...
Which I explain in my book. Super Vulnerable, Highlights, Becoming a Demon Slayer with Jesus. It's on Amazon. Go check it out. So we didn't have that understanding though. And that was the problem. We didn't realize that Ephesians 6:12 was so relevant to our experience. And we ended up fighting each other instead of turning together to fight in the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
So why did we start with the spirit of motherhood? And oh, by the way, I think it's fitting. Our daughter, Jaira, is here with us. She's just resting and nursing, by the way. So forgot to introduce her. She's present. I find this interesting because the Lord definitely took us through what felt like a long, drawn-out journey to deliverance. And just so that I'm clear, so that everybody actually understands what we were delivered from and what we've been delivered to. Let me just make that very, very clear. We were delivered out of utter darkness where having children was an absolute burden, drew an absolute wedge between you and I. Our marriage was completely crumbling. Our foundation was shattered. We were not standing on the rock.
Nope.
And we were heading in separate directions.
Yeah.
That's where we started when it came to children. That's how bad it got. And now what we're talking about is what he's delivered us to, which is like a place now where it's like, you have the capacity to homeschool our children. We are in so much of a better place as a couple. And by the way, it's this woman first and then our children. Like we've made that commitment. Like, no, we come first. And if we're good, then that means our children are good. And I think that was a huge switch for us. Like when we made that switch mentally and in heart posture, it really impacted us. But I want to talk about now, because the Lord gave used some very interesting instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this in my book as well. But it was a time where we were in Florida. We were about to come home. The Lord speaks to you, gives you instructions that make absolutely no sense because you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2 children.
And you might wonder, like, well, you guys had another baby even after, those 2 really bad experiences. But I really felt my spirit that we weren't complete, that our family was complete. I'd see my boys and I'd see Josh, and I think somebody is missing. I don't know who that is. And so originally Josh didn't want to have another baby because
that was pure obedience on my part, because I was like, if it was that bad with 2, why would I want to go back to that place? You had just come out of your postpartum. We were starting to get into a better place relationship wise, dynamic with the kids, all of those things. I'm like, why would I want to go back to a place where the postpartum depression, the anger, the rage, the walking on eggshells, all of those things, why would I want to go back to that? And it's funny because we were just talking about that last night.
Yeah. And I said to you, I was like, you know what? Well, if that bridge even comes, because we don't know, we can't base our stuff off of the last previous ones, even though sometimes you can. But I was like, no, that's, if I'm really sensing that there's still somebody missing, then we need to probably press forward. At least I was there.
Yeah.
You weren't.
Yeah. So getting to the part where the Lord speaks to you, gives you the instruction to leave me in Florida.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there. Okay, we're sitting at the World Through Him Church in Kissimmee, Florida, and the word is being preached, and I just sense the Spirit talking to my spirit, and I know this. I know that He's speaking. I'm very familiar now with the way He speaks to me, or at least one of the forms, and I'm getting these almost like I'm talking to myself, but basically I get the download that would it be so far-fetched that Josh stays a month or stays behind and the kids and I press on back home? And so I got so uncomfortable because that's just not anything in my, to be with the kids by myself is not in my jurisdiction one bit, because I struggle with having the kids. Post or prior. So I had to get up and leave the service and walk around a little bit and be like, okay, is this going on? Is this really happening? So I actually went and confided in the pastor's wife and just said, is this really far-fetched? Is this blah, 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 blah? So,
and not to cut you off, but I think it's important also to understand the reason as to why He was giving you that instruction, because there was work that still needed to be done there from a ministry perspective.
I was going to get into that. So once that happened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start praying into it. And what I felt the Lord pressing again on my spirit, the reasoning behind it was that Josh, that there was still work to be done in the ministry, that He was going to allow me to come home like my heart really desired, because I really wanted to get back home. I was really tired of being in Florida for that long. But that there was still work to be done. So it was almost like He was compromising with me in a sense, and giving me what I wanted, but also giving, what the ministry needed, that opportunity as well, which again blew my mind. But at the same time, as much as I was nervous to be thinking I'm going to be with the kids, my pregnant, and with my 2 rambunctious children, that's nuts. I also had an instant peace, and I knew I could do it. I'm like, this is going to sound crazy, Josh. So when I brought it to Josh, I was like, when I brought it to you, I was like, this is going to sound crazy. I just want you to hear me out. And I could see a little bit of I
didn't think you were serious, because I had just come off of I had been away for 17 hours, literally doing ministry, and it wasn't planned for either. So the piece is that you came home, I stayed, and God did some very interesting things with you and with myself. But we're talking specifically about your experience when you came back. What did the Lord do?
Yeah. So I won't touch much on actually the transfer from going from Florida back to Canada with my 2 kids and being really pregnant. But I will say that the Lord's hand was completely over it, completely on it. And so when I got back home, we were then moving into this new space that we're in right now, which was awesome that my parents were able to bless us with this at the opportunity and the time that we needed it. And so I was able to establish a routine with my kids, well, our kids. And because one thing that I really struggled with was getting them to really listen to me, because when Josh steps in the room, it's like, oh no, daddy's here, we need to listen. But when mommy comes, it's like we can play around and goof off and be disrespectful, because I didn't know how to properly discipline, because I just couldn't stand on my own 2 feet because of my mental illness, I'm going to say, and because of this and that. And so what it allowed me to do was cultivate an excellent routine. And because I was the one that they needed to listen to, I'm like, I need no, even though I'm in pain, physical pain, because the pregnancies were always tough for me.
You rose to the occasion.
I rose to the occasion, and
by the
grace of the Lord Jesus. Now, I walked out of that in a completely different person. So whoever's watching right now, I am telling you, if you would have known me prior to and then now, it was a complete 360. I don't know, whatever it is. Complete transformation of my spirit and renewing of who I am. So it was almost like Charlotte was, 1.5 and now I'm Charlotte 2.0. And so when Josh came back, he was completely surprised. And even we would talk pretty often, almost every night, I think, just saying how the day went. And he was just, I'll let you speak on that, how surprised you were.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised. And I knew that God did something. It was evident to you. It was evident to me, and we spoke about it. And it was evidence. There was actual, I saw it, and every day I saw it, evidence. And every time I thought, okay, maybe this will fade. Maybe it's like she's got her mojo back for a little bit, like in the past.
Yeah.
And then it would fade. It kept going. So I was like, I believe that this is true. This is exactly what happened.
Yeah. So. And after the completion of you staying in Florida and you coming home, I was able to realize and to see where God's hand was in everything. And he was orchestrating this. When he spoke to me in that service, what he did. So he actually ended up killing 5 birds with, no, what is it? Yeah, 5 birds with 1 stone. Because one of the biggest things was people were very, I'd say, concerned about, Josh leaving his pregnant wife to travel from Florida by herself back to Canada and then being alone for a whole month.
Nobody understood that.
Yeah, nobody did, especially.
By the way, even the people that we were staying to help. Yeah. They didn't initially understand that either.
But we said, you know what, this is what we believe the Lord is speaking about to us. So pray on it. And if the Lord moves you, then this is a go. So that's why we pressed forward, because they were in agreement with it. Yeah. And we were being able to be obedient altogether.
Yeah. This was the move of God, the hand of God in our lives through and through. Mm-hmm. It was a full-on miracle.
Oh, man. Something definitely in my life that I can say and pinpoint that this was probably one of the biggest movements that Christ has moved in my life.
And I find it interesting because you had been through a lot of deliverances. I always tell people I sit with in sessions, mm-hmm. My wife's been through a lot of sessions, guys. A lot of sessions. You're impatient for freedom. Oh boy, let me tell you, we had to be patient. And there were so many sessions you went through. And interestingly enough, yes, evil spirits had left you, but your soul still needed to heal. Mm-hmm. You had soul wounds upon soul wounds upon soul wounds, and those needed to heal, and you needed to be restored. So that month, I believe with my entire heart, God restored you in your role as a mom. Mm-hmm. God reestablished you in your role as a mom.
Yeah, because of what my assignment is.
Correct. Yeah. So interestingly enough, sometime after this had happened, it wasn't right away. Sometime after this had happened, we were praying one night,
after Gyra, but just as Gyra was born.
This is after. Like, this is after Gyra was
5
born.
months after.
And we were praying one night, and I just remember you saying, like, I sense something in the spirit, like there's something there.
And just so that people are aware also, is that I didn't have postpartum depression. I haven't had postpartum depression with Gyra, and I will not have postpartum depression with Gyra, in Jesus' name.
And you can say that confidently because you also know how to fight.
Yeah.
Because I remember you sitting outside on the veranda one day, and
just
you
after I had her,
in the spirit, you saw that black hole.
Yeah.
And it was like looming around you. It wasn't over you. You weren't in it, but you saw it.
Yeah.
And it was a moment where
I just could have stepped. I took one step forward or one step wherever towards that, I would have been able to be captured into it. But I was so confident. I'm like, I don't want that. I can see how easily I would be able to be wrapped up in that right now. But I just was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So one night we're praying, and you sense something in the spirit. So I begin praying over you, and a spirit manifests. It starts speaking through you, and I start questioning it. Like I'm interrogating this spirit now. Like, who are you? How did you get in? How far back do you go? And it starts revealing, like, I entered the bloodline in 1876. I entered through a woman named Gladys. This woman could not get pregnant naturally.
And just before you go on, this is going to seem extremely far-fetched to some of the people that are listening right now. But I just actually pray right now that whoever does need to hear this, that the words that we're speaking implements and into the hearts of spirits or people that are ready, because it's going to sound really cheesy and really ridiculous, and you might even have the reaction, of like, oh, that's not even true. I'm going to click out of this.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to backtrack and say that again. So as we're praying, I believe the Lord himself allowed this spirit to manifest. It was something that had been hidden, right? Which is the agenda of any demonic spirit, is to hide, is to stay in the background.
Yeah.
And the Lord allowed, it's like, okay, now it's time for them to confront this spirit. So this spirit manifests, and I begin interrogating it, as I often do, especially if they're speaking. I'm like, I want to know exactly how you got in, exactly the root, so that we can rip you from the root.
Yeah. And because I already had multiple sessions before. Josh and I are continuing learning about how the spirit or how the enemy works. I was able to actually help more than what I've ever been able to when these things have happened, because I'm in tune with my spirit, and I'm able to come through.
And just to clarify for the people listening, you were still coherent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Understood everything that was going on, even though the spirit's speaking through you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm questioning this.
Quite aware of anything that's happening.
And I said, like, how far back did you come in? And it said, I entered into the bloodline 1876. I entered through a woman named Gladys. This woman could not conceive naturally. So what this woman did, and you can look at a bunch of testimonials online, what I'm saying is actually not uncommon in that time. This woman goes to a certain river, and it's a mystic river, and there's a goddess of this river. And the way it worked is, if you went and you dipped in this river and you did all this ritualistic stuff, I didn't know exactly what was done. That wasn't revealed. But if you did those things and you cooperated and came into agreement with the goddess of that river, you would then come out of that river and you would be able to conceive.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happened. But this woman had no idea that she entered into a covenant with the spirit, and the spirit's name that she entered into covenant with was Apollyestai.
Yeah, that's what was revealed through the prayer. Yeah. She wanted to become pregnant but couldn't, and was actually pretty mocked by her fellow friends from women. That's what was revealed through our session. And that's why she had to go and seek for some extra help.
Which, by the way, I mean, what a great way for Satan to enter a bloodline, because if he can destroy a woman, that gives him access to the seed. This is why many of you mothers are struggling with postpartum depression, with depression long after your child has been born, why you're like the irritation, the despair, the anger, the rage, the anxiety, the fear, all of these things. Like, yes, hormones play a role. Yes, these natural things play a role, but there is something spiritual that happens. And we've lived this, and we know because we've been delivered from it. So when this spirit manifested, we started interrogating, we started getting that background. Now, for those of you that are saying, well, that was a demon, it lied to you. Listen, when I'm interrogating something, the Jesus in me is doing the interrogating. So the spirit's not going to lie. Okay. And I always ask the spirit, like, is that the truth before Jehovah God? Is that and they will tell me if they're lying or not. So we were able to get that information. And interestingly enough, we didn't get rid of the spirit that night. We thought it had left, but it hadn't fully left you yet.
Yeah. It actually was seeing some of the spirits that our little guy, our youngest kingdom, was seeing outside of our condo, which is really interesting as well.
Outside of his room.
Yeah.
And while we were doing the deliverance, it was looking outside at those spirits. And we were saying, what do you see? What's outside? And it started revealing the spirits that are outside. So this is something that you parents should understand too. Like, there are literally, it was like a choir of spirits outside of our children's bedroom window. They couldn't enter through the window, but they were out there, and it was like they were watching us, watching our kids, and they were looking for some sort of open door. And one of the spirits was loneliness. So just something to give you guys as parents awareness. Spirits, if they can't get to you, they're going to 100% try and get to your kids. So you got to cover them with the blood of Jesus. You need to pray over them. Pray that angels come and watch over them, protect them. Trust that God has your kids, but definitely do your part in prayer to cover them.
And we'll talk more on that at another time.
Yeah. So second time rolls around, you sense we need to pray again. Actually, I think I kind of pushed you to pray again, because I was like, we know something's there. Let's deal with it. And the Lord actually gave you instructions ahead of this. And the instructions was about praying in tongues.
Yeah, about praying in tongues, and praying in tongues every day. And at that point, it was every day for the week. And so what Josh was doing to encourage me was to check in. Did you do your praying today? Did you do your praying today? And I had pride during that time, because I'm like, did you pray? Did you pray today? You know, but the thing is that the reality is that because he's encouraging me and helping me, it also helps me to stay on track. Right. So just as just for couples out there, encouraging and standing by your spouse to help them in what they believe the Lord is calling them to do is really important.
Yeah. So when we came and addressed that spirit the second time, we found out it was like a second layer of skin.
Yeah.
And that spirit's agenda was to cripple your ability as a mother. That was the whole agenda of that spirit. That was the agenda of that spirit of motherhood. It was to cripple your motherhood, gain access to your seed, and continue to travel through the bloodline.
Yeah, because even when that spirit manifested, I always felt the urgency to reach for Jaira, which was really interesting. She was just in the crib, sleeping beside. And we were like, there were so many things that connected that was an eye opener. I'm like, why would you? So if we didn't have the knowledge,
it wanted to pass through.
And
it was revealed that it couldn't touch her. It couldn't do anything to her. So, and you were delivered from that spirit. So it was interesting. Like, you had been already delivered from the soul aspect after that first month, but then the spiritual aspect, we finished that off at a later time.
Yeah.
And then that's when we knew it was done.